Stanley Kubrick is one of the most prolific Hollywood directors of all time. I say Hollywood because he operated within a different system than Fellini, Godard, Kurosawa, and Tarkovsky. But we must consider some of the great directors who came before him in Hollywood, like John Ford, Kazan, Wells, and Hitchcock. But for modern-day audiences, his work still garners a lot of attention and analysis. His life and directing style is often cited by many filmmakers, and his work is just as mysterious as his biography. Here, in my opinion, are his top 5 films. Number 5, Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket is a film that unfolds in 2 acts. The first act is the psychological conditioning of a soldier who eventually turns into a murderer. And it's the state, the nation itself, that could be considered the bad guy here, as each member of the story is driven and molded by an institution of the state. It is one of the clearest depictions of classical conditioning. The first act is iconic, and so many consider it to be the best part of the film. On repeat viewings, the second act, where the conditioned soldiers then go out into the wilderness of Vietnam and adapt to the environment itself, I've come to realize it's just as engaging and well-crafted as the first act. The way the background actors were placed in the scene, the atmosphere that can rival Apocalypse Now, and the journey of Joker that eventually culminates in soldiers singing the corporate Mickey Mouse song all lend themselves to endless interpretation. Number 4, The Shining. The Shining is a film that upon release saw Kubrick receive a Razzie nomination for Worst Director of the Year. The film was highly criticized for betraying Stephen King's novel. It was a moderate financial success during its theatrical run, which was highly important to Kubrick after the commercial failure of Barry Lyndon. With its modern take on a monster movie and its slow and deliberate ride into cabin fever and madness, this is one of Kubrick's greatest contributions to cinema. It can be watched as a horror film in one sitting and a comedy in the other. It has been widely analyzed and continues to be one of his most popular films. Number 3, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This is the film that truly saw Kubrick as the comedian. His later work, I think, would be informed by this film. Within each Kubrick movie, there is a certain sense of humor that can be detected on its deepest layer. This does not hide the comedy, but still gives us an important social and historical commentary on the foolishness of those in power, and the danger of leaving these same people in a position to make drastic decisions. It humanizes those with power and drapes them in folly. This is one of my favorite Kubrick pieces on human nature and politics. Number 2, 2001, A Space Odyssey. Some consider 2001 to be the greatest Hollywood film ever made. It was able to tell a story within the Hollywood model of large-scale filmmaking and still be an experimental and abstract piece of cinema. As Sandy Pan Deb puts it in Mint magazine, 2001 is the finest form of poetry in the garb of science fiction. It is a dreamscape masquerading as cold outer space. It is an experience that you immerse both your left brain, the seat of logical thinking, and right brain, the seat of creative thinking, in. It is a film that exudes technical prowess and gives us, in the third act, a vision of the future that is difficult to shake. Hal is one of the most memorable characters in cinema history, and seems to be truly ahead of its time. I do want to point out that Tarkovsky made Solaris as a direct response to the shiny, polished look of 2001. But I will argue both incorporate ideas that are just as abstract and remain just as mysterious. Number 1, Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut is the only Kubrick film that I was able to see day and date in the theater. It was released July 16, 1999, and I couldn't have been more excited to see a picture than this. I hate to admit that the first time I saw it, I was utterly bored in the theater. I couldn't believe that all the Kubrickian decisions that I had fallen in love with in his previous films had on the surface seemed to have been abandoned for bland shots and a boring, erotic detective story. Over the years, I have come to watch this film every Christmas, and each time I find myself seduced more and more. And what I first thought was slow and boring has now become hypnotic and enchanting. It's a story that still fills me with mystery and wonder. And even though I often think about what would have happened to the picture if Stanley lived for a couple more years, I do find it gratifying that he was not able to fuss over it and that the picture was released as it is right after his death. He has often been cited as saying 2 things. One is that his greatest contribution to cinema is Eyes Wide Shut. It has also been recorded that he was disgusted by the final product. Hearing both of those statements come from the same man, to me, sounds like just the process of filmmaking. Sometimes you want to stand up after an edit and say, this is the greatest film I've ever made. And the next day, you might wonder why the heck you're doing this in the first place. Thank you very much, Stanley.